Oh, it is so good to have racing back on track. Hello and welcome into one of this week's NASCAR Cup Series Rewind shows right here on Racing News Now. As always, I'm your host, Garth Allen. Thank you once again for joining me today. If this is your first time catching a Racing News Now video, consider going down below for me, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell for notifications so you don't miss a thing going forward from RNN. On today's NASCAR Cup Series Rewind show, the first one we've had in like 2 months now, 10 weeks, something like that, we are finally back on track with some real racing, not iRacing. It is the real thing now. May not have fans in the stands, but we are back on track, and that is the important thing for now. It was the Real Heroes 400 from the Darlington Raceway in Darlington, South Carolina. That unique egg-shaped oval down there, the first super speedway in the South. It was 293 laps, 400 miles, around that 1.36 mile speedway, and it was an interesting race. There were things going on at different points. It wasn't the most exciting race ever. I'll say that right off the bat. It wasn't the best race, but it was a good race to come back on. There were things happening. There were feel-good stories in this race. It was the first race back for Ryan Newman. After that scary wreck he had in Daytona, he only missed 3 races actually, because he was technically at Daytona. He only missed 3 races, and he was back today. Then we had Matt Kenseth in the 42 car, actually having a good race. We had drivers up front at the end of this race that I don't think any of us expected to see up front in this race. There was so much going on in this race, so let's dive right into it. Not a lot happening in the first stage. Although the first incident did happen on lap number 1, Ricky Stenhouse, for some reason, made it 4 wide off of turn 2 on the first lap and makes contact with the car on the outside, spins himself into the inside wall. Ricky Stenhouse did not even complete a full lap in this race. So he was out very early in this one. Nothing else happening until the competition caution at lap number 30, which was a modified competition caution, different than what a normal competition caution is. This one, they got 2 chances to pit under this caution. The field was frozen. You did not lose your position nor a lap unless you got passed by the pace car or you got some sort of pit road infraction. That was the only way to actually lose your position under this caution. But in essence, those first 30 laps were kind of a replacement for practice, since we didn't have practice or qualifying. You just kind of shook out where your car was at, and then that competition caution was there to make adjustments for where the driver wanted the car to be in this race. Only other incident in stage number 1 actually happened on the last lap of stage number 1. Jimmie Johnson, who quite possibly could have had the fastest car in this race and quite possibly could have been on track for his first win in almost 3 years, made a bit of a mistake coming off of turn 2 on the final lap of stage 1, pushed the issue a little bit too hard, dove it inside of Chris Buescher off of turn 2, trying to lap Chris Buescher, and ends up sliding up the track. Buescher slides up with him into the wall. Buescher bounces off of the wall into Johnson, which spins Johnson into the inside wall, ending Jimmie Johnson's day, and probably the best run Jimmie Johnson has had in almost 3 years. Very heartbreaking to see the 7-time champion have that happen to him, especially given that this is his final season and that he's now back in a competitive state. Hopefully that's not the last time we see him up front. I think Wednesday at Darlington will definitely be another solid run for him. But that, obviously, since that was the last lap of stage 1, that ended up being the stage 1 conclusion caution, and the stage 1 win went to William Byron, of course, after Jimmie Johnson wrecked out of the lead. Stage 2 was a little more eventful. Stage 2, I joked on the watch party, which, by the way, if you're not watching the watch party, what are you doing? That's where the cool kids are. Wednesday, we're having another one for the second Darlington race this week, so definitely come out, hang out with us, and watch the race with us here on RNN on the watch party. But anyway, I joked during the watch party that Stage 2 took so long in this race. Stage 1 flew by because there really wasn't any incidents except on lap 1 and at the very end. Stage 2, there was all kinds of things happening. William Byron, who probably was the fastest car after Jimmie Johnson had his incident, very shortly into the second stage, lap 110 specifically, he had an issue. I'm not sure if it was some sort of mechanical issue or if it was a tire issue or what it was, but he got extremely loose, slapped the wall in turns 1 and 2. Really pancaked that right side of the car and essentially ruined the car for the day. Trying to get it back to pit road. There wasn't a caution initially. He was trying to get it back to pit road and then loops it in 3 and 4, and that brought out the caution. But effectively, that would be the end of the competitive day for William Byron. Lap 125, Daniel Suarez spun off of turn 2. Lap 156, we had a debris caution for a blue emu banner that was stuck to the wall in turn 3. Pieces of it had come off and onto the racetrack, so lots of interesting things happening in 2020 that I never thought we'd have happen. We're having cautions for a banner coming unstuck on the outside wall. That's a sentence I never thought I would say, but here we are. It's 2020. The impossible is possible now. Final caution of stage number 2 came at lap 174 as Christopher Bell spun off of turn 4 and slapped the inside wall on the front stretch. Stage 2 concluded at lap 185 with Brad Keselowski taking the Stage 2 victory. Brad Keselowski had a very fast car in this race. Only a couple of incidents in the final stage. Lap 213, Chris Buescher and Christopher Bell got together on the front stretch, and final caution, lap 254, as Ryan Newman spun in turn 1. 10 lead changes in this race among 6 drivers. Kevin Harvick led the most laps, 159 laps total for him. Brad Keselowski led 80 laps. Alex Bowman spent 41 circuits out front. 9 laps were led by Jimmie Johnson. 3 laps went to William Byron. And J.J. Yadley spent 1 circuit out front in this race. All right, so William Byron was your Stage 1 winner after Jimmie Johnson had his incident. Brad Keselowski won Stage number 2. Kevin Harvick led the most laps in this race. Alex Bowman also spent a good portion of time out front in this race, but who would come home victorious in NASCAR's return? It would be the driver of that 4 car, Kevin Harvick. Came into this race as the points leader and finally picks up his first win of the season to lock himself into the playoffs. Very strong car all day, and it became very evident, especially as we got into Stage 3, that he had the fastest car. Now, that may not have been the case early in the race. If Jimmie Johnson and William Byron were still around at the end of the race, they might have given Harvick a good run for his money. But as with who was left at the end of the race, it was definitely clear that Kevin Harvick was the class of the field at the end of this event. He beat out Alex Bowman, who came home in the second position. Alex Bowman continues his very strong run this season, and it was actually just announced yesterday that Alex Bowman had a contract extension. He will be in that 88 car for at least 1 more year at Hendrick Motorsports, and he's showing why that was a good decision. Already picked up a win this season, and very easily could have gotten that second win of the season today in Darlington. Kurt Busch came home with a strong 3rd place finish. A little surprising there, to be honest. He was not really in the picture early in this race, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere there in Stage 3, that 1 car was up front and contending for this win. So kudos to Kurt Busch for figuring out something late in this race and getting up there to the front. Chase Elliott had an on and off day, probably the weakest of the 4 Hendrick cars all day, but when push came to shove at the end of this race, he was able to pick up a top 5 in that 4th position. Denny Hamlin also fast all day. He rounded out the top 5. Rest of your top 10, Martin Truex Jr. Tyler Reddick with a very strong top 10 run there in the 7th position. Good job to Tyler Reddick there. Eric Jones, your 2019 Southern 500 winner, came home in 8th. John Hunter Nemechek, very strong run for the rookie there in 9th position. So 2 rookies in the top 10 in this race. Very strong runs for them. And Matt Kenseth, in his first time in a Cup car since the 2018 finale at Homestead, comes home in the 10th position. Pretty fast all day long. He kept it there about 11th to 15th most of the day, but it was very evident late in the race that he had figured out the new style of car. He's been out of the car for over a year, so it was going to take him a little bit of time to get acclimated to things. He finally figured it out and came home with a very, very respectable 10th place finish for his first time out. I think we're going to see some really good things out of Matt Kenseth in that 42 car as the season goes on. 48-year-old Matt Kenseth. Weird to say that. I didn't even realize he had gotten that old, but definitely age is not slowing him down any. 11th through 20th, Austin Dillon with a strong run in 11th. Brad Keselowski faded late even after leading 80 laps. He came home in the 13th position. Ryan Newman, in his return since his scary crash at Daytona, had a really good run going. He was up there top 10. I think even might have cracked the top 5 at one point. Had a really fast car, but unfortunately had that spin late, which relegated him to a 15th place finish. Ryan Blaney off all day, came home in 16th. Clint Boyer was up there at different points. He was up in the top 5 at one point in this race, but faded late, came home in the 17th position. Joey Logano had flashes of brilliance throughout the day, but unfortunately he faded late as well and came home in the 18th position. 21st through 30th, Bubba Wallace came home in 21st. Cole Custer also showed speed at different points in this day, but unfortunately was not able to hold on to it at the end of the race, came home in 22nd. Christopher Bell, last car on the lead lap after all of his incidents on the day, came home in 24th. Kyle Busch slapped the wall at one point, then had a tire issue late. All kinds of stuff happening to him. He had to start from the rear after failing pre-race inspection. 26th on the day for the 2019 Cup Series champion, Kyle Busch. Final page, 31st through 40th. Chris Buescher, after his couple incidents on the day, was able to muster a 32nd place finish. William Byron, after his issue there in the mid-portion of the race, I think had one of the faster cars in this race, but unfortunately got relegated many laps down and ended up in the 35th position. Jimmie Johnson landed in 38th on the day, only completing 89 laps, and Ricky Stenhouse out before even completing a lap in this race. He finished shotgun on the field in 40th. So that's your results from the Real Heroes 400 from the Darlington Raceway. I'm not 100% sure if we have any post-race audio. I don't know how the whole post-race media center deal worked out. I know they didn't actually go to the media center, or I don't think they did. If there's any kind of video or audio or anything we can give you from Kevin Harvick, it will be right here. If not, let's go ahead and jump into the playoff grid following this race. We're now 5 races into the season, so the playoff grid is a little more formed up than what it was a couple of races ago. Obviously, we now have 4 drivers locked into the playoffs on wins. Joey Logano, the only driver with multiple wins on the season, and then, of course, Kevin Harvick, Alex Bowman, and Denny Hamlin, each with a win on the season. Chase Elliott, currently your highest driver in on points, and then the battle back here at the cutoff line. Technically, Kyle Larson is still 15th in points, but after missing this race, and who knows how many more, probably the rest of the season, you really can kind of count him out of that 15th position. And really, you can kind of bump Eric Jones into that 16th slot for now. I wanted to put Kyle Larson in there because officially he is still in that 15th position. Although, the thing is, even if he comes back, I doubt he gets a playoff waiver. So, for all intents and purposes, you can scratch Kyle Larson off that list and bump Chris Buescher up to 15th and Eric Jones up to 16th. Austin Dillon only a couple points back, as well as Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick, all very close to a playoff spot. William Byron sitting currently down in 21st, just off the graphic here. He is currently 8 points back, so definitely within striking distance. And once he gets the bad luck that he's had early in the season off his back, I think he's definitely going to be a contender for the playoffs, no doubt about it. Cole Custer still relegated down here to 24th. I think he'll pick up the performance there as we get later into the season. Ryan Newman currently 28th in points. Again, he has a playoff waiver, so he can point his way in or win his way into the playoffs. Pointing his way in will be a little more difficult, although not impossible. He's only 47 points out of the playoffs at the moment, so definitely not impossible. Might be a little tricky, but definitely not impossible for Ryan Newman. Christopher Bell, as we get further down here, Christopher Bell's one that I think might be a little tougher. Christopher Bell sits 32nd in points currently, about 70 points out, so he's got a ways to go. And then Matt Kenseth, of course, this is his first race of the season, but he also has a playoff waiver, so if he wins his way in or somehow points his way in, he will be in the playoffs, but currently sits 34th in points. But that is your playoff grid following the Real Heroes 400, the 5th race of the NASCAR Cup Series season. And I believe that will do it for us on this NASCAR Cup Series Rewind show. Xfinity Rewind coming up on Tuesday night following their race, the Toyota 400 from Darlington. Keep an eye out for that, as well as A couple different things, actually probably 3 different things coming up on Wednesday. Now that we got racing back, there's all kinds of stuff in the works here at RNN. Wednesday we'll have a NASCAR Heat 4 stream, as we usually do on Wednesdays. It'll be bumped up a couple hours because obviously there's a race Wednesday night now, so we got to be done before that. So I believe I've got that planned for 5 p.m. on Wednesday. So keep an eye out for that. I'll have a more concrete time on that when we have the Xfinity Rewind on Tuesday, but it should be 5 p.m. on Wednesday for the NASCAR Heat stream, and then watch party, of course, for that race as well. So like I said, if you didn't hang out with us tonight for the watch party of this race, definitely do it Wednesday night. That's where all the cool kids are. Just hang out with us, watch the race with us, chat about what is happening in the race. It is a fun time for that. And then, of course, we'll have a rewind show on Wednesday night as well for that. And then, of course, all the Charlotte stuff coming up next week. Diecast review coming up on Thursday. We've got all kinds of stuff coming up in the next week or so now that NASCAR is back. So I hope you are as excited as I am for all of that. So if you haven't done it already, you need to go down below, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of that going forward from RNN. While you're down there, I want you to hit that big thumbs up button for me if you like the video. It is much appreciated when you do. But at that, this has been the NASCAR Cup Series Rewind Show. I'm Garth Allen for Racing News Now.